Conventional classrooms, by emphasizing fixed duration over learning effectiveness, resign themselves to variable outcomes. Emphasizing fixed duration over learning effectiveness, resign themselves to variable outcomes. So, conventional classroom, they emphasize on fixed variables or learning effectiveness. Whatever has been taught, are you able to understand that or not, right? They resign themselves to variable outcomes. So, whatever has been taught, you are just learning that. That is the whole point of conventional classroom. They resign themselves to variable outcomes. There are variable outcomes. I mean, now we have to discuss what variable outcomes does the author mean by. The tyranny of the classroom is that every learner is subjected to the same set of lectures in the same way for the same duration. In the end, a few learners shine, some survive, and the rest are left behind. After the fixed duration, the classroom model moves on with not a thought spared for those left behind. This is how we end up with 10% employability in our graduates after a decade and a half of formal education. Repeating the same line ineffectual script in the realm of skill education will not produce different results. So, what the author is saying is that there are different ways in which different people learn. We teach all of them. There are 100 people in the classroom. We teach in the same way to all of them, irrespective of their needs. And what actually happens? Some shine, some are able to grasp it very well. Some survive, some basically just survive, just able to get past, and the rest are left behind. A lot of them are not able to learn properly, and with this, because of this, we end up with 10% employability in the graduates, a scary number. So, because we are following the same repeating ineffectual script in the classroom, and this will not produce different results. So, if you are teaching in the same way every single time, how would you produce a different outcome every single time? So, this is what the passage is talking about. Now, which of the following statements best reflect the most logical and rational inferences? Inferences, again, evidence that can be made from the passage. In conventional classroom learning, the central goal is duration of learning rather than attainment of competency. Yes, duration of learning, yes, for a fixed duration of time, you're learning for the same way for the same duration. You're not focusing on the outcome or whether you're able to learn things or not, right? Same way for the same duration, everyone is being taught. So, that is why this is an inference that can be made. Conventional classroom encourage one size fit all approach and stamp out all differentiation. That is true. Same way of teaching to them all does not cater to the different needs and demands. So, yes, select the correct answer using the code below. Both 1 and 2 are the inferences that can be made. Moving ahead to the next question. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. As a large number of workers in our country are unemployed in our unorganized sector, India does not need to change its present conventional classroom system of education. Okay, so the passage says that, okay, in unorganized sector, large number of people are employed in our country. So, basically it's saying that 10% graduates are able to get jobs, but the remaining are there in unorganized sector, right? So, what is the point of changing the conventional classroom system? There is no point of changing it, it's working. Those people who are, the people are eventually able to find jobs in unorganized sector. So, what is the point of changing the classroom structure? This is the assumption that the option is making. Is this right according to the passage? No, the author clearly says that it lacks, the approach is absolutely wrong and it must be changed. So, this is not the assumption that should be made according to the passage. Even with its present conventional classroom system of education, India produces sufficient number of skilled workers to fully realize the benefit of. Now, this is also something that is not. Author calls that 10% number as not so good scenario, says that only 10% are being able to get employed. So, that is not a good scenario. So, how would we be able to achieve a demographic dividend by just being able to provide employability to only 10%? So, no, even 2 is not right. So, both, which of the following assumptions are valid? Neither 1 nor 2, that is our answer. When a child reaches adolescence, there is apt to be a conflict between the parents and the child, since the latter considers himself to be by now quite capable of managing his own affairs. Okay. Child reaching adolescence, conflict between parents and child. Why? Because the child thinks that now he can take care of himself or herself, while the former are filled with parental solicitude, which is often a disguise for love of power. Okay. So parents consider usually that the various moral problems which arise in adolescence are peculiarly their province. The options they express, however, are so dogmatic that the young seldom confide in them and usually go their own way in secret. So what is actually happening? Adolescents, the teenage years, there is a conflict between parents and children. Why? Because children think that they can take care of themselves. On the other hand, parents think that they should be the one who should be in charge. They should be the one who will be taking the decisions. Why? Because there are certain moral problems which arise in adolescence and parents think that they are expert at it. What happens because of that? They are so dogmatic, they are so you might say conservative in their opinion, they are so stuck to their thought that eventually if something comes up, the teenage kid might, instead of opening up to their parents, will not do that and will keep things in under the sheets, under the blinds, right, and will keep them secret. So this is the problem that the okay, which of the following statements best reflect the central idea of the passage? Which of the following might be of central idea of the passage? Parents in general may not be of much help when children are on their way to become adults. Yes, somewhat true. We can park this option. Why? Because they are very dogmatic in their belief and they are not really providing a safe space to the child, and that is, they are not really contributing fruitfully, right? So during the teenage years, the adolescence, children, that's why they keep things in under wraps. They don't share things with their parents, and that's why option A may not actually makes this option a strong choice, because it's not saying they are not completely useless. It's saying that they may not provide a lot of help because their approach, their way of looking at problem is very dogmatic. So yes, could be possible. When children reach adolescence, involvement of their parent is unnecessary. Now this is something that I will eliminate. Not unnecessary, it is necessary. The passage never says that the parent's involvement is absolutely unnecessary, so B can be eliminated. C, modern day nuclear families are not capable of bringing up children properly. Does the passage really talk about nuclear families here? Not at all. Does it say that they cannot bring up children? That also is not there, so C can be eliminated. D, modern societies, adolescents tend to be stubborn, disobedient and careless. The passage never goes on to blame the victim. There is no victim blaming in the passage, so D is also not the right answer. A is the only one that makes sense, so A is your right answer. Based on, next question, based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. The adolescent does not feel comfortable with his parents because they tend to be dominating and assertive. They don't feel comfortable with his parents because they tend to be dominating and assertive. Yes, because they have certain outlook, they are very dogmatic about their outlook, and that is why the children, the adolescent doesn't feel comfortable in sharing his thoughts or opinions and keep things under wraps, keep things under secrecy. So yes, this is true. Adolescents of modern times does not have much respect for their, absolutely wrong. Never does the author imply that they don't respect their parents or anything. So which of the following assumptions is are valid? Only one only, so that is your answer. We take it for granted now that science has a social responsibility. The idea would not have occurred to Newton or Galileo. Now we think that science is a social responsibility, but Newton or Galileo might not have thought in the same way. They thought of science as an account of the world as it is. We are thinking of science social responsibility. Science should lead to benefit of society, not destruction of society. This is how we think. Galileo and Newton, when they were discovering things, when they were formulating scientific principles, they thought of it as the science is showing what world is actually like, showing the world as it is. Gravity is there, laws of motions are there. They show how laws of motion work, how motion works, how gravity works. That is it. Jupiter is there in the sky. What exactly is Jupiter? How many moons does Jupiter have? So these are the things that Galileo and Newton were focusing towards. They were not really absolutely not concerned with the social aspect of science. And the only responsibility that they acknowledged was to tell the truth. Only responsibility was to tell the truth, because the society had different needs at that point of time, so their thoughts were also different. The idea that science is a social enterprise is a modern, and it begins at the Industrial Revolution. With Industrial Revolution came the aspect of science having social responsibility. We are surprised that we cannot trace a social sense further back, because we nurse the illusion that Industrial Revolution ended a golden age. So we are surprised that social sense was not before that. Science was as it is, without any social responsibility. We are surprised to know that. Why? Because we think of the world before industrial revolution was all golden age, everything was good, there was no capitalism and the world was flourishing. This is how we perceive. So that is why we are surprised that, oh, science was not seen in a socially responsible way. So this is what the passage is talking about, that social responsibility. So basically, if we want to summarize it, the social responsibility factor has been very recent, since the dawn of industrial revolution. Prior to that, scientists basically focused on showing science as it is. Their main focus was truth and not social responsibility, right? Now moving ahead, which one of the following statements best reflect the thinking of the author about the science? Science must value the commitments of the scientist. Does the author say that science must value commitment of the author, that is, it should always show the truth? The author never says that. So one can be eliminated. Science is a product of civilized society and must be used for the promotion of scientific awareness in people. Product of civilized society, okay. And must be used for promotion of scientific awareness among people. We have not really discussed this. Is this the thinking of, is it reflecting the thinking of the author, or basically is it the main idea of the passage? Not really. And that's why B can also be eliminated. C, industrial revolution was made possible by the advancement in science. Was that the focus of the passage, that science advanced, that's why industrial revolution was there? No. C can also be eliminated. Science must pursue truth, yes, but be responsible for social welfare. Yes, that is what the passage is talking about. The whole purpose at how the science was looked by these scientists was, it should pursue truth. At the same time, should also have a social responsibility, a social welfare, right? So yes, option D should be is our right answer. Let's have a look at the next passage now. When an international team of scientists pumped a carbon dioxide and water mixed into underground basalt rocks, basic chemistry took over. The acidic mixture dissolved rocks, calcium and magnesium, and formed limestone. Basically, carbon dioxide is converted into stone, exclaimed the scientists. Water, carbon dioxide mixture pumped into the cracks between basalt rock led to formation of limestone. That's it, right? So why? Because this acidic mixture of carbon dioxide and water, it dissolved the rocks, calcium and magnesium, and thus forming limestone. So question, which of the following statement best reflect the most logical, rational and practical suggestion implied? Implication question, again similar to inference question, right? What is the author hinting towards? That is implication. It is a cheap and practical method to produce limestone at commercial level for building purpose. Does the author say that it is cheap and practical? Yes, because it can be done, but is it cheap? We don't have any information about that, so one can be eliminated. This can be used as one of the methods of carbon sequestration. Now what is carbon sequestration? Basically taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and sequestering it, right, with the help of water bodies or with the help of forest. This is another way, by forming limestone by drilling them into the basalt rocks. So yes, this is a possible implication. Basalt rocks can be made a good source of calcium and magnesium minerals by this method. No, they are already good source of calcium and magnesium. They cannot be made good source of calcium and magnesium. This is wrong. Option D now. Good rock dissolving acid can be produced by mixing carbon dioxide and water. Are we really talking about rock dissolving acid or basalt rock dissolving acid? That is one thing. And are we really concerned with dissolving rocks, or creating limestone, right? So this is even not the better answer. Obviously, B is the better choice out of the rest, and that is why B is the right answer. Now let's move to the next passage. Geographers analyze 175 satellite images of ocean color, which is an indicator of phytoplankton productivity at the ocean surface. They analyzed 175 satellite images of ocean color. Ocean color, the color of the ocean is an indicator of phytoplankton's productivity. If you know, phytoplankton are the biggest source of oxygen on this planet. So if they are being productive or are they lesser in number, this can be determined with the help of the satellite images which was done by the scientists, and found that giant icebergs are responsible for storing up to 20% of carbon in the Southern Ocean. So icebergs are storing up to 20% of carbon in the Southern Ocean. These icebergs are sequestering carbon. Southern Ocean is basically the ocean surrounding Antarctica. The researchers discovered that melting water from giant icebergs, which contains iron and other nutrients, supports hitherto unexpectedly high levels of plankton growth. So with the help of images, they realized that the melting water from the icebergs, the glaciers of Antarctica, they contain very high amount of nutrients such as iron and other nutrients. What happens because of that? That leads to high levels of phytoplankton growth. That leads to growth of phytoplankton, right? So, based on the above passage, which of the following assumptions have been made? Giant icebergs have bearing on primarily productivity and food chain of the Southern Ocean. Yes, why primary productivity and food chain? Because phytoplanktons are at the bottom of the food chain. Now here you need to use a little bit of your general knowledge. They are at the bottom of the food chain. So what actually happens? Giant icebergs are inviting more phytoplanktons, which has a bearing, which basically affects the primary productivity and food chain of the Southern Ocean. So affects productivity because since because the icebergs are inviting more what do you call it, phytoplanktons. Because of those phytoplanktons, more fishes are coming. More fishes are leading to further more predators of those fishes, and all of that. The whole food chain is being formed around those. So yes, this is an assumption that can be made. Melting of giant icebergs can produce climate change effect and impact world fisheries. Yes, fair enough. It can impact world fisheries. How? Because if iceberg is melting, it is attracting phytoplanktons, but it should be attracting from some other places, right? So with phytoplanktons, fishes follow. So the already places where are a lot of phytoplanktons and fishes, now they are running dry of them, and that is why this impacts the world fisheries and also produce climate change effect. Because 1 and 2 are correct, that is why which of the following assumptions are valid? Both 1 and 2. Now let's move to the next passage. Evolution has endowed caterpillars that feed on corn with a unique ability. They can induce the plant to turn off its defense against insect predators. Okay, so the caterpillars that feed on corn have unique ability. They can make the plant to turn off its defense against insect predators. This helps caterpillar to eat more and grow faster. The agent that causes this effect is caterpillar's feces or frass. So caterpillar's feces is the stool, right? It turns off the defense of the plant against these insects that feed on the plant, and thus these caterpillars are able to eat more and grow more. Then the find could throw new light on compounds associated with plant response to pathogens like fungi or bacteria. So this finding can help us to understand more how plants respond to pathogens like fungi or bacteria. So we have read that this caterpillar which feeds on corn, its feces can make the plants turn off their defense system against the predators, and now this will help us to understand how plant respond to fungi and bacteria. What is the compound, what are the things that actually what actually makes plants susceptible to the impact of fungi and bacteria. Now, Which of the following statements best reflect the most logical, rational and practical message conveyed by Raj? Again, this is the main idea question. Most logical, rational and practical message conveyed by the passage. What is the message that the author is trying to share or the passage is trying to share? Now, farmers can use caterpillar to feed on weeds on their crops, plantation. Is this the point, or our point is to learn how to protect our crops from fungi or bacteria, right? So, A can be eliminated. This finding can help in the development of clinically useful antimicrobial. How is antimicrobial compound relevant to that? Not at all. See, finding can help in development of organic, ecologically sustainable pesticides. Yes. Now we know what kind of compounds do these plants react to. Thus, we can make sustainable pesticides, which is very much given by the passage. So let's park option C. I've ticked it, but let's park it. Option D now. Caterpillars can be genetically modified to be predators of the other plant pest. Can they be genetically modified? Did we discuss this? We have not discussed this. So D can also be eliminated. We are left with C. C should be our right answer. Let's have a look at the next passage. In a robust democracy, reality, however, so inconvenient it may be, finds its expression both in the speech of political leaders and other social forms of assertion. Truth eventually comes out in a robust democracy. Satyamev Jayate in robust democracy, both by political leaders and other forms of assertion. The existence of the real has to be transparent. Existence of reality has to be transparent. People should know what the reality is, both through its circulation and in by the media as well as its argumentative articulation in deliberative democracy. So, not just by the circulation in media, the truth should be known by all, not just by the circulation in media, but also by its argumentative articulation in deliberate democracy. It should be argued, it should be discussed in the deliberate democracy. Deliberate means, deliberation means discussions. Okay. Now, a normatively responsible media through its communication effect has the responsibility to certify. So, it is the responsibility of media to circulate the content of reality without distortion. So, basically the passage is saying Satyamev Jayate in a robust democracy, okay, and it is the duty of media to take care of that. Simple, very straightforward. Let us tackle the question. Which one of the following statements best reflects the crux of the above passage? The responsible media should not distort the real in an ideal democracy. The real, that is basically the truth or the reality in an ideal democracy. Responsible media should not distort it. This is true. This is in line with what the passage says. Media's responsibility is to show the truth, circulate the truth without distortion. So, best reflects the crux of the passage, the main idea of the passage. This is absolutely true. So, let's park it. B. Fake news seems inherent in the life of. We have not discussed fake news, and are they inherent in the life of an ideal democracy? They actually are not. They are not inherent. In an ideal democracy, the truth comes out, the real comes out, and it's discussed openly. So, B is not the right answer. See, there should not be any kind of restrictions on the freedom of expression in an ideal democracy. Now, freedom of expression is a very vague term. It could lead to, it could mean a lot of things. We are talking about the truth here. Freedom of expression is a very broad, not vague, but very broad term. So, are we talking about that? And there should not be any kind of restriction. Did we really discuss the restrictions on freedom of speech? Sorry, not speech, expression? No. So, C can be eliminated. D. Irresponsible media and political leaders cannot be effectively controlled in an ideal. Absolutely wrong. Ideal democracy actually has a very robust way where truth actually comes out and is actually deliberated, it's discussed. So, D is not the right answer. We are left with A. A is the right answer. Moving ahead, the next passage. Nowadays, there is a growing trend to use interconnected home devices. Interconnected home devices. As consumers increasingly network their homes, the connected home device manufacturers and service provider will seek to overcome thin profit margins by gathering more of our personal data with or without our agreement, turning the home into a corporate storefront. What this reminds me of is, there is this these Google Nest or the Amazons, that Alexa, right? The devices, they are interconnected. Different devices are connected to them. TV is connected to it. Your mobile phones are connected to it. Your mobile phone is connected to TV as well. Your Wi-Fi is connected to everything. Your car is connected to the Wi-Fi. Your car is connected to the mobile phone. So interconnectedness of the home device manufacture of the devices, right? The home devices. So what is happening because of that? These manufacturers and service provider will seek to overcome thin profit margin. So they have very thin profit margin, are making a lot of profit. So what they are going to do? They are going to collect your personal data with or without your information, with or without your consent, sorry, and they are turning the home into a corporate storefront. So basically they are turning a home into a shop where they can advertise products to you based on your own information that they have collected from you. So corporate marketers will have powerful incentive in observe customer behavior, consumer behavior, to understand the buying needs and preferences of the device owners. So basically consumer behavior, so they have powerful incentive. That is why they have very high incentives to learn, to observe what consumers, how consumers are behaving, and thus they can generate money based on that. Okay. Now moving ahead with the question, which of the following statement best reflects the most logical? Again, this is the main idea question. Main idea. What is the main idea of the passage? Basically, it's the data collection that is done by the corporate marketers, right? Those who sell the home interconnected appliances such as Alexa or Google Nest or whatever that is. Knowledge of consumer behavior leads to more capital expenditure in manufacturing sector. Where did this come from? More capital expenditure in manufacturing sector? Absolutely not. Option A can be eliminated. Capital expenditure, we have not really discussed it, right? Capital expenditure is part of the fiscal policy. Where did fiscal policy come here in the consumer behavior paragraph? 2. Knowledge of consumer behavior stimulates the growth of commerce and trade. Growth of commerce and trade, again the same thing, it's more capital expenditure, more growth of commerce and trades. Absolutely wrong, can be eliminated. We don't have to even read the rest of the line. Interconnected devices, okay, now finally something is talking about it. Give a lot of comfort to home users and improve the, no, the passage is not talking about the comfort provided by the interconnected devices, it's talking about how they can be used to collect your own private information, and then you can be your information can be monetized eventually by showing you advertisements. Interconnected device can be a security risk and many users have privacy risk. Yes, it's a security risk and privacy risk. We have parked this. Okay, this is the only option left. D is certainly the right answer, no doubt about it. It's a security risk because you are being sold as a commodity in the market. Your information is being sold. Anything which is very private to you, if it goes out, then you are at a loss. Your security is at danger, and that is why D is the correct answer. Moving ahead, the next paragraph. Green growth involves rethinking growth strategies with regard to the impact on environmental sustainability. Green growth. Green growth, from the name itself, it's clear. If you are imagining growth, it should consider the environmental factors into, it should take environmental factors into consideration. And environmental resources available to poor and vulnerable groups. So its impact on environmental sustainability, any growth initiative, its impact on environmental sustainability should be taken into consideration, and also the environmental resources available to poor and vulnerable group, that should also be taken into consideration. That how bad are you affecting the environment, and are you going to affect the environmental resources which are available to poor, for example firewood, or for example agricultural land, right? For example, some tribal groups still live in forest. If you're chopping down the forest, then they might lose their home. So that is the poor and vulnerable groups, right? They should be involved, and that is what the green growth is all about. They should be taken into consideration. So in rethinking growth, we need to focus on the current reality of a resource constrained world. Okay, resource intensive and in particular energy intensive process will need to make way for far more efficient and resource frugal development. Resource intensive development should make way for resource frugal. The development which consumes up a lot of resource should make way. Now we should move from that to resource frugal, the type of development which can be achieved without expanding exploiting a lot of resources. That is what the move should be towards. If we are to avoid an economic dead end or a world in which only a small elite is able to enjoy affluence in the midst of sea of poverty. If we want to live in a world where we don't reach an economic dead end, then this is the approach that we should take, from a resource intensive to resource frugal outlook. Or if we don't want to live in the midst of a small group of elite who have all the resources available while others don't have. So this is what we have. Now let's have a look at the question. Which one of the following statements best reflects the crux of the above passage? One of the following best reflects the crux. Again, main idea based question. Crux of the passage is main idea. Let's have a look at the options. Environmental sustainability is inimical to our objective of achieving a high rate of growth. This is not, inimical means against or enemy. Is it enemy? Is this what the passage is saying, that if we want growth, high GDP growth, then we should not worry about environmental sustainability? Absolutely not. And that is why option A can be eliminated. Option B, poverty eradication is not possible without a rapid economic development, economic growth, and the consequent environmental degradation. Again, this is very much similar to, if you want to remove poverty, you need to have very high growth, and for that it's okay to degrade the environment, is what option B is trying to say. Eliminated. This is not what the passage is saying. See, maintaining high environmental standards, which is green growth, is now a prerequisite for achieving a steady, sufficient and inclusive growth. Yes, because we have to move away from resource intensive to resource frugal, and that is what a high environmental standards are. We need to take care of the environment as well, so that we don't end up with an economical dead end, or with an economy where only a small group of elites are able to afford things, or they have control over all the resources and others don't have. So C is sensible, we can park it. Let's have a look at D. With large populations, rampant poverty and limited resources of today's world, environmental degradation cannot be prevented. Absolutely wrong. The passage is not saying that it cannot be prevented. You look for these words, they are dead giveaway that this option is not going to be the answer. D eliminated, we are left with C. C is definitely our answer. Let's tackle the next question now. Unlike religion and science, poetry does not posit or expect any belief in absolute truth. So unlike religion and science, poetry does not have any absolute truth. Those forces, no absolute truth in poetry. Those forces or individuals who claim to have absolute truth in their grasp tend to turn dictatorial and tyrannical. Those who tell you that they know the right way, they know the absolute truth, nothing else knows the absolute truth, they tend to dictatorial and tyrannical. These things end up being dictatorial and tyrannical. Only I can tell you what to do, only I can salvage you, only I can protect you, only I can take you towards the truth. If someone says that, they turn dictatorial and tyrannical. Truth usually does not admit any contradictions or imperfections. It is Unitarian. There is absolutely Unitarian truth. It's unit. There is no contradiction or imperfection. Truth is truth. Very philosophical in nature, this paragraph is. It is therefore not of much use for poetry. So poetry cannot use this Unitarian truth, right? If poetry believed in absolute truth, then there is not much to talk about. It's singular, it's Unitarian, it's one. What would you write about such things? So that is why it's not of much use to poetry. So poetry abides by the plurality of life and existence. So poetry is about plurality of life. It talks about life and existence, different experiences, different ways a life is lived. And perhaps poetry follows reality, which is plural, anachronist and full of contradiction. So poetry follows life, poetry follows reality, which is plural. Anachronist, anachronist means does not belong to one period of time and full of contradiction. It is absolutely opposite to truth. And against the tyranny of truth, poetry remains a partisan of democratic reality. So against the tyranny of truth, a lovely passage, brilliant passage. The tyranny of truth, the dictatorship of truth, the dominance of truth, that I am the only thing, there is nothing else which exists apart from that. Poetry remains a partisan of democratic reality. Poetry very much is inclined towards the democratic reality. There is no one single truth. There are plurality and they exist all together. There are difference in thoughts, there are difference in lifestyle. And that is what the poetry supports instead of the absolute truth. Against the arrogance of power, which the truth is, wealth and hierarchy, again which the truth is, poetry proposes both humility and defiance. Poetry talks about both humility and defiance. It is against the arrogance of truth. So poetry and truth, very, very lovely passage, very philosophical in nature, and I'm also reading it for the first time, so I'm loving it, whatever has been said. Truth is absolutely, it leads to dictatorship. Only I know what to do. Only I know. There is single truth. There is no ifs and buts about it. Truth is truth. Poetry doesn't have anything to do with it. What will you write about such things, right? So the poetry talks about the plurality, poetry talks about the diversity, poetry talks about life, not the truth but the reality, and that is how it imbibes the whole essence of democratic principles in it, right? Brilliant passage. Let's tackle the question now. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational message conveyed by the above passage? Most logical and rational message conveyed by the above passage. Which one of the following implies that? It is a poetry, not science. Again, the main idea question basically. It is a poetry, not science or religion, which recognizes and accepts the imperfections in nature. No, it is the poetry which recognizes and accepts the imperfection in humans, not science or religion. It looks very dicey. Let's do one thing. Let's come back to this option. Let's come back to this option. Truth is revealed through science or religion, and poetry is anathema to truth. Is it anathema to truth that existence of poetry, if poetry exists, then truth cannot exist? Is it what the author is trying to say? No, they can both exist. Truth talks about just one thing, poetry talks about different things. So both can be existing at the same time. So B is not the right answer, B can be eliminated. C, poetry is romantic, imaginary and is about feeling, whereas science and religion are about truth. Is it so? Is it romantic, imaginary and feeling? Okay, let's come back to this option C as well later. Let's have a look at. So we have clearly been able to eliminate D. A and C, they look a little dicey, not really sure whether they are right or not. But let's have a look at all the options first. In a world of violence, tyranny and bigotry, poetry is a form of dynamic resistance. This makes actually a lot of sense. Because the passage even says that against the tyranny of truth, democracy remains a partisan of democratic reality. Not democracy, sorry, poetry remains a partisan of democratic reality. Against the arrogance of power, wealth and hierarchy, poetry proposes humility and defiance. Defiance against power, hierarchy and power, hierarchy and what was the other one? And wealth, poetry defies it. So it's a form of dynamic resistance, yes, because it goes against the violence, tyranny and bigotry. This makes a lot of sense. Let's park D. Now let's go back to C now. Poetry is romantic, imaginary and is about feeling, whereas science and religion are about truth. Okay, now unlike science and religion does not proceed or expect any belief in. Now this says science and religion are about truth, right? But the passage is not saying that. Passage says that science and religion claim that they are about truth, right? Unlike poetry, poetry does not make any such claims. So this is the problem. Are they about truth? They might be about truth, but they might not be as well. This is saying that they definitely are, and that is why option C can be eliminated. A, it is a poetry, not science or religion, which recognize and accept the imperfection in human beings. Yes, this is True, this is true. Not science and religion. I mean, we don't really know whether science or religion accepts it or not. Science or religion does talk about the truth, but does it not accept the imperfections in human being? We cannot really comment upon that. That is one thing which would make option D a better answer than option A. But there is also one more thing that I have noticed, which is this is not really the crux. What is the purpose of poetry? This does not answer that. The whole passage was discussing what is the purpose of poetry. This was not answering that. D is answering that, and that's why D should be the right answer. Okay. Now we move to the next passage. Flower was not invented to please us. It flaunted its petals and spread its perfume to attract an insect. Insect carries the pollen from flower to flower so that pollen is not carried away by wind and does not waste it. What we call a flower is a beauty, flower's beauty is merely a byproduct and a human invention. The perfume is not there to please us, it pleases us because it is there and we have been conditioned to it. So, very straightforward passage. The flower was not made to please us, it already exists and thus we get pleased by it, right? It is not there to please us, it is not there, it was not invented. Flowers were not made so that humans could feel good, they were already there. It pleases us because it is there, it is already there and we have been conditioned to it. It is already there and we like it, we have been used to it, we find it colorful, we find it with good smell, right, perfumey, and that is why it pleases us, but it was not made to please us. Okay, very straightforward. Based on the above passage, following assumptions have been made. The author of the passage believes that flowers are creation of nature's luxury. Are they creation of nature's luxury? Absolutely not. This is what the author is talking against. They are not nature's luxury, they serve a specific purpose and that purpose is to procreate, not luxury. Like luxury is not really used, like luxury is not something which is needed. You have luxury because what's wrong with that, right? It's for abundance, it's not something which is useful for survival or anything. So not luxury, this is not the answer. Author of the passage does not believe in the usefulness of flowers. No, very wrong. The author never says that they are not useful. This is absolutely wrong. So 2 can also be eliminated. Which of the following assumption given above are valid? None of them are valid, so option D should be the right answer. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, 1/3 of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally. Food is lost or wasted throughout the supply chain from initial agricultural production to final household consumption. The increasing wastage also results in land degradation by about 45%, mainly due to deforestation, unsustainable agricultural practices, and excessive groundwater extraction. The energy spent over wasted food results in about 3.5 million tons of carbon dioxide production every year. Decay also leads to harmful emission of other gases in the atmosphere. Addressing the loss and wastage of food in all forms is critical to complete the cycle of food sufficiency and food sustainability. The passage is very straightforward. The passage talks about certain facts. What is the fact? That according to FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organizations, what we are going to do right now before I explain the passage, we are going to summarize this passage in 2 to 3 bullet points and then we will tackle the question, right? We are going to extract the main idea. This is the passage in front of us. We are going to extract the main idea of the passage. What exactly is the point that the author is, major point, the most important point that the author is trying to make. Extract it, write it down here and then we will jump to the questions, right? Now, I am writing it down here. In the examination when you will be solving questions as well, you do not have to write it down. I am writing it down for your convenience, for my own convenience. But in the examination, you won't have this much of time. So, it would be better to just keep mental notes with you, okay? Mental notes of whatever you have read. So, it says 1/3 of food produced, 1/3 of food produced is lost every year. Right? Yeah, 1/3 of food produced for human consumption is lost every year globally, and food is lost or wasted throughout the supply chain from initial agricultural production to final household consumption. Now, the first point obviously that I am going to write down is the loss of food produced, right. This is what the author has said, 1/3 of the food is lost. I am not going to write the number, I am just going to avoid all the unimportant unnecessary details, right. It is given there in the passage. They are not going to check your factual information retention capacity. What they are checking is whether you are able to understand the passage or not, right. So, the first part of the passage says that food is wasted and throughout the supply chain. Why is this happening? It is happening throughout the supply chain. And what happens because of the wastage in food? The increasing wastage results in, what does it result in? It results in there are a few things that it results in. The first one is land degradation, let me call it LD, land degradation. The second one is, okay, I am also trying to save my time as well, right. That is why I am writing shortcuts, short forms. Due to deforestation, unsustainable agricultural practices and excessive groundwater extraction, that is why land degradation. What is the next thing that is happening? Energy spent is leading to greenhouse gas production, right. So, GHG production, right. And what is that? Decay. Well, actually it is CO2, but I am just writing GHG for my own convenience. Decay also leads to harmful emission of other gases, other harmful emissions. And addressing the loss and wastage of food is critical to complete the cycle of food sufficiency and food sustainability. So, what do we need to do? Address the issue for sufficiency and sustainability. Of what? Of food, right. So, here I am ready with my main idea of the passage. The passage is clear. There is loss of food, 1/3 of food is lost, there is loss in food production. What happens because of that? Land degradation, greenhouse gas production and other harmful emissions, right. The third thing, address the issue. Now, what do we need to do after that? Address the issue. For what? For food sufficiency and food sustainability, okay. So, these are my points. Now, I am going to tackle the question. Let us have a look at the question now. Which of the following statements best reflect the most logical and rational inferences that can be made? So, the question is talking about the inferences that can be made from the passage, right. Now, inferences, they need to have evidence. As you might have seen, I covered it in the 2025 paper as well. Inferences, they come along with evidence. You have to find what is the evidence, where is the evidence, and then you can tackle the statement. So, read the statement, check whether it has evidence in the passage or not. If it has evidence, then the inference can be made. If it does not have evidence, the inference cannot be made. So, you eliminate the statements of this, the statements which cannot be inferred, right. We are looking for the statements which can be reflected in the passage, that can be made, inferences that can be made in the passage, right. So, let us have a look at the statement 1. The current methods of food distribution are solely responsible for loss and wastage of food. Now, they are responsible. The passage clearly says that food is all wasted throughout the supply chain from initial agriculture production to final household consumption. Yes, the distribution methods are responsible, yes, but are they solely responsible? No, because nowhere does the passage say that they are the only reason why we are having the loss of food, loss of food during the distribution, and that is why option 1 can be eliminated, because there is no evidence, right. Let us have a look at statement 2. Land productivity is adversely affected by the prevailing trend of food loss and wastage. Land productivity is affected by food loss and wastage. Is it true? Yes, land productivity is affected because it leads to land degradation. And why is that happening? Because of certain reasons that the passage mentions, right? Such as deforestation, unsustainable agricultural practices and excessive groundwater. So basically what is happening? You are degrading land by doing these things, using excessive groundwater or unsustainable agricultural practices, right? For example, trying to grow rice in a desert, you might see that in some countries it's happening. So it is one of the example for that. So 2, can that be inferred? Yes, because there is evidence. Let me write down evidence. Since there is evidence, this can be inferred. 3, reduction in the loss and wastage of food results in less carbon footprint. Can this be inferred? Yes, because the last the last statement talks about the food sufficiency and food sustainability, which is directly linked to the carbon footprint, right? Basically, carbon footprint here refers to sustainability. So, if you are reducing loss and wastage, you are moving towards sustainability. And yes, we have evidence for this. Or statement 4, post harvest technologies to prevent or reduce the loss and wastage of food are not available. Did we discuss technologies being available or being unavailable? Not at all. This one can be inferred, this one cannot be. Statement 4 cannot be inferred. We have not discussed whether technology is available or not. The passage talks about us having not so good practices, not so good habits, and because of which we are suffering. There is no mention of the availability or unavailability of technology, and that is why 4 can be eliminated. So only 2 and 3 can be inferred. Which option covers that? So yes, option B is the right answer. Also, you didn't have to read, now when I looked at the options, you don't have to go through statement 4 at all. No need of going, because all the other options contain 1, and you can see here we have eliminated 1 because there is no evidence available. So obviously B is the left, we are left with B. B should be the right answer. Let's have a look at it. I mean, we don't have the solution slide, but B is definitely the right answer. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. There are certain assumptions that have been made. Assumptions are always tied to the conclusion, right? So assumptions are unsaid premises which always point towards the conclusion, okay? So anything that you assume based on the passage is an assumption, but again it cannot be any random assumption that the passage is talking about food and waste and its wastage and you're assuming something randomly about democracy or something. No, you can't do that. The assumption should be tied to the conclusion. Whatever the author has tried to conclude, the assumption is the part that the author has not said but believes that you will understand yourself. That is assumption, okay? So based on that, we have to identify, based on the passage, we have to identify which of the following assumptions have been made. The food distribution mechanism needs to be reimagined and made effective to reduce the loss and wastage of food. Yes, absolutely. Because the passage itself talks about the loss is throughout the whole logistic process, right? Where is that? Throughout the supply chain. The loss is throughout the supply chain. The food is lost from initial agricultural production to final household consumption. So yes, the loss is throughout, and if we reimagine the mechanism and made effective to reduce the loss and wastage of food. So if we reimagine the mechanism, we will be able to overcome this loss, is what the passage is the statement is saying, and it is absolutely a fair assumption. So yes, this can be assumed. Statement 2, ensuring the reduction of wastage and food loss of food is a social and moral responsibility of all citizens. Now this one is a little tricky. We have not really delved into the part which talks about the social and moral responsibility yet, but the catch in the passage actually, but the catch here is that yes, this can be inferred, this has been assumed by the author, because there is a certain term here. Where is that? 1/3 of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally. Where is that? Where is that? Yeah, production to final household consumption. There is a loss in household consumption as well. So us as individuals, as citizens, us as people of earth, it is our responsibility to prevent that, and it is our social and moral responsibility because we are also part of the whole chain. Yes, and that is why this assumption can also be made. Although again I repeat, nowhere has the author implied or hinted towards social and moral responsibility, but that single word, household consumption, it brings the citizen into the mix, and that is why statement 2 can also be a fair assumption. So based on that, both 1 and 2, option C is the right answer. So now let's move to the next passage. Okay. As inflation rises, even governments previously committed to budget discipline are spending freely to help households. So what is the first line saying? Inflation is increasing. This is leading to increasing in spending. Spending to do what? To help the households, right? Higher interest rate announced by central bank are supposed to help produce modest fiscal austerity, because to maintain stable debts while paying more to borrow, government must cut spending or raise taxes. Without the fiscal backup, monetary policy eventually loses traction. Higher interest rates become inflationary, not deflationary, because they simply lead governments to borrow more to pay rising debt service cost. The risk of monetary unmooring is greater when public debt rises, because interest rates become more important to budget deficit. Very heavy on your economics terms, but it's fairly simple. It says government, as the inflation increases, even the governments that are fiscally tight, that don't spend a lot of money, are spending money to help whom? To help the household. Now what actually happens? Higher interest rate announced by central bank, which is the central banks basically, your RBI in India or federal bank in USA, are supposed to help produce modest fiscal austerity. So what is the point of these rates, higher interest rates? They want fiscal austerity, to be more austere, to be more careful, right? They want that, because to maintain stable debts while paying more to borrow, government must cut spending or raise taxes. So fiscal austerity expected. Why? To be able to be to maintain, or to be for stable debts, and what is the mechanism for that? This, you either have to where is that, borrow government. I'm very close to the screen, so I'm not able to see. Yeah, by paying more, or uh, must cut spending or raise taxes. So stable debts, and for that, to pay them, cut spending or raise taxes. Now higher interest rates become inflationary, not deflationary, because they simply lead governments to borrow more money to pay rising debt service cost. The risk, so what does this instead leads to? They increase the interest rate. What happens? The central bank increases the interest rate to ensure the fiscal austerity. What happens because of that increase in interest rate? That leads to inflationary reaction. It leads to inflation. How? Because they simply lead governments to borrow more to pay rising debt service costs. So government is raising debts. Now they need to borrow more to pay back those debts. And when they are borrowing, there is already higher interest in the market, so that is going to cost them a lot as well, right? So this one, higher interest rate leads to inflation. That is enough, right? Because leads to, wait, higher interest rate. Now the risk of monetary unmooring is greater when public debt rises, because interest rates become more important to budget deficits. So monetary unmooring is greater when public debt rises. because interest rate becomes important to budget deficit. Oh wait, I think I missed one line as well. Did I miss any line? Because they simply lead government to borrow more. Okay, fair enough. The risk of monetary unmooring is greater. Okay, the risk of going off the track, basically monetarily going off the track, is higher when public debt rises. Why? Because interest rates become more important to budget deficit. So you are paying more interest and that leads to more budget deficit, right? So basically I'll just add one more line, it leads to more budget deficit. There are certain terms that the author has used here which uh, on the first read might confuse you a little, but they are very straightforward. The passage is saying the simple thing. It says that government, when there is a inflational scenario, what happens? Government spends a lot, right? To spend a lot, what do? They borrow, right? But at the same time, when inflation is high, the central bank increases the rates. So central bank increase the rate, inflation is high, so to government is also spending more. So what is government going to do? Government obviously is going to borrow. So now government is borrowing at higher interest rate, and now when government is borrowing at higher interest rate, it basically dents their big portion of budget because they have to pay back a large amount of interest, right? So that is what the passage is simply saying. So both of these things, they go hand in hand. Now moving ahead, let's have a look at the question number 1. Which of the following best reflects the most logical and rational inferences that can be made? Again, we have to look for inferences. So we are looking for the statements. We are looking for the statements with evidences, right? Any statement that has evidence in the passage is going to be the statement that can be inferred. Now 1. Central banks cannot bring down inflation without budgetary backing. Yes, we have a sentence right there in the middle of the passage. Here, without the fiscal backup, monetary policy eventually loses traction. They cannot control inflation, they cannot control anything if they do not have the backup of the fiscal policy or the central government. So yes, this can be inferred, we have evidence for this. 2. Effects of monetary policy depend on the fiscal policies pursued by the government. Yes, the same line is also talking about the same, and also the rest of the paragraph is the evidence for this, that yes, whatever fiscal policy that the government decides, that will also decide the effect of monetary policy. So yes, both 1 and 2 can be inferred from the passage. Which option? Okay, the options are actually, yes, the options are actually wrong. The option, this one is only 1. Wait a second. This one is only 1. Option 2 is only 2. I can edit it as well, but I would rather sum it up quickly. So 1 and 2, both 1 and 2 is option C, and neither 1 nor 2. Okay. So since both 1 and 2 can be inferred, the right answer is going to be C, both 1 and 2. Okay, that is the answer. Moving ahead, question number 4. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. Again, the assumption question, inference, assumption, inference, assumption. What is this question asking? Assumption, again, critical reasoning. You have to be very astute with your observation. You have to be very attentive with the detail, and you should learn how to read in between the lines. Fiscal policies of governments are solely responsible for higher prices. Are they solely responsible for higher prices? No. Why? Because monetary policy is also responsible for higher prices. This is what the passage clearly says. So 1 cannot be the answer. 1 cannot be the assumption, and that is why we are eliminating 1. 2. Higher prices do not affect the long-term government bonds. Do they affect government bonds or do they not? They affect the government bonds. Why do they affect the government bonds? Because it's given there in the passage itself, right? That public debt rises because interest rates become more important. So what is happening actually? The debt rises, along with that the interest also rises, and since you are borrowing at higher interest rates, you have to pay more interest as compared to usual. And that is why higher debt, or what does the statement say? Higher prices, they do affect the long term government bonds, because you have to eventually pay more interest, and because of that it takes out a big chunk of your budget. So both 2 and 1 cannot be inferred from the, sorry, both of 2 and 1 are not, cannot be assumed from the passage, they are not the assumptions that can be made from the passage. So the right answer would be neither 1 nor 2, none of them can be a right assumption. Okay, let's jump to the next passage. Today, if we consider cities such as New York, London and Paris as some of the most iconic cities in the world, it is because plans carrying a heavy system approach were imposed on their precincts. The backbone of the system theory, plans carrying a heavy system approach, is the backbone of the systems theory is the process of translating social, spatial and cultural desirables into mathematical models using computing, statistics, optimization and an algorithmic way of formulating and solving problems. The early universities of West, which began to train professionals in planning, spawned some of the most ingenious planners who were expert in these domains. This was because these very subjects were absorbed into the planning curriculum that had its root in the social sciences, geography and architecture. Planning in India and its education differs from the West. So now the passage is very straightforward. I am not even going to write down the bullet points for it. It's very straightforward. It says New York, Paris, London, all of these cities, they are so iconic because there has been a heavy focus on how these cities are laid down, how these cities are planned, and this planning has its root in the social, spatial and cultural desirables. So there is social element of the city, cultural element of the city, desirable element of the city, right? Cultural and spatial, the space, right? How do they want to use the space? All these elements are there of a city, and that those elements were inculcated or imbibed into mathematical models. So keeping those things at the back of their mind, they basically planned how the city should be made. On the other hand, India's concept of planning differs very much. Planning and its education, planning and planning education is very much different from West. Western people considered these three things to be very important while planning the city. India differed from West in this sense. Okay. So based on this, now it's very clear, very straightforward. I'm not even going to write down. What are we going to do is, we are going to tackle the passage now, sorry, question now. The first question: which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational inferences? That again, an inference based question, logical inferences. We have to look for the statement with evidence. A. Curriculum for urban planning courses should have diverse and interdisciplinary approach. Can this be inferred from the passage? Interdisciplinary approach and diverse approach. Could be. Yes, it could be, because the passage actually talks about social, spatial and cultural desirables, and then you're intermixing mathematical models and computation with that, right? Statistics. So yes, it sort of makes sense. Let's park option A. We are parking it, not eliminating it right away. There might be some issue with option A. We'll have a look at it later if there is some issue. In India, city administration is under bureaucracy which lacks formal training in urban planning and management. Although this statement looks true, but is it really true according to the passage? Not really, because this is not something that has been mentioned in the passage. Again, inference is based on evidence. Do we have any evidence for this in the passage, that Indian city administration is, since it is under bureaucracy, that is why the planning is not that good, because these bureaucrats, they lack formal training in urban planning and management? Absolutely not. So B can be eliminated because it's not really something that can be inferred from the passage. C, in India, the management of urban areas is a local affair with a chronic problem of insufficient funds. Again, this is not something that has been written in the passage. Both the options are absolutely wrong. We have zero clue about how planning in India takes place, apart from the fact that there is no interdisciplinary approach. Because in West, there is interdisciplinary approach. You are taking social, cultural and spatial elements, and then you are adding it with mathematics, statistics and the whole scientific part, right? You're taking the social part, adding scientific part to it, and then you plan the city around it. In India differs from West in this aspect. So that is why there is no such aspect in India, but this point that urban affair is local affair and urban areas are is a local affair and their management, and with the chronic problem of insufficient funds. Is this really discussed in the passage? Do we have any evidence for this? No. So C can also be eliminated. D, with high density of population and widespread poverty in our urban areas, planned development in them is very difficult. Again, this is giving an excuse which was not really needed in the passage. We did not discuss this excuse in the passage at all. So even D can also be eliminated. There could be an assumption that has been made. There could be assumption, no doubt, but are they inferences? No. And that is why, could be, I mean, I am not saying all of these assumptions can be made, but some of these statements which have been said could be assumptions, right? But they are not inference because we do not have any evidence for B, C or D. So we have eliminated all three, we are left with A. A should be our answer. Moving ahead to the next question. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. There are certain assumptions that have been made. We have to identify which of them are valid, right? So which of the following assumptions are valid? Are valid. We are looking for the assumptions that are valid, that are true. Assumptions, again, critical reasoning, they should lead towards the conclusion, right? So 1, India needs a new generation of urban professional with knowledge relevant to modern urban practices. Yes, this is an assumption that can be made. Yeah, why? Because India lacks such professionals, because Western practice, it has universities, it has curriculum, it has people, right? Where is that? Yes, it spawned some of the most ingenious planners who were expert in these domains, who were expert in the domains of these things, who looked at developing space or planning cities from a very scientific attitude. So, which is something that, and its education differ from India, which is something that India did not have, India lacked it, right? So, yes, this is the assumption that can be made, absolutely right. Indian universities at present have no capacity or potential to impart training in systems approach. Do they have no capacity or potential to impart systems approach? Is it, do they have no capacity or potential? Absolutely not. The passage says that we differ from that. Our approach is different, but are we absolutely incapable that we cannot even teach this? We are Indians at the end of the day, our job is to teach, right? Even I am doing the same. So, do we have no capacity to do that? Absolutely not. That is not what the passage says. We differ, our approach is different. The way we look at the problem, the way we look at urban planning is very much different. The way we teach urban planning is also different. But can we teach it the way Westerners do? Most probably yes, right? Because we do not lack, the passage never says that we absolutely have no capacity, that is why we are not teaching it. So that is why 2 can be eliminated right away. Which of the following assumptions above are valid? Only one, so A should be the right answer. Okay people, let's have a look at this passage. Not every voice on the internet commands the same kind of audience. When anonymous private entities with high capital can pay for more space for their opinions, they are effectively buying a louder voice. So basically people who have more money are more capable to buy louder voices. More money, more money, more space to speak, or more people who are going to listen to you. This is what the passage says. If political discourse in the digital sphere is a matter of outshining one's opponent till the election is won, then the quality of politics suffer. If the whole political discourse is that we should perform or we should outshine our political opponent instead of really talking about the issues, that is the thing. If you want to be look more glamorous, if you want to look more appealing to the people, instead of talking about the things, you are more visible to the people is what the passage is trying to say. Then maybe quality of politics is going to suffer. The focus of social media is restricted to the promotion of content that generates more user engagement, regardless of how inflammatory the content may be. So, it affects social media, it affects the political discourse, right? How does it affect the political discourse? How does it do that? It affects the political discourse by saying giving more space to content that generates more user engagement. And regardless of how inflammatory they are. So, it could be absolutely inflammatory. Someone is telling other people to kill someone. But since it is very viral, it is very popular, social media will show it again and again and again and again. And that plays to the advantage of people who have more money, is what the passage is trying to say. Now, based on that, let's try to answer the question. Which of the following best reflects the central idea of the above passage? Now, central idea, we have extracted the central idea, our central idea. We have to compare the options with this. Whichever one is in line with this is going to be our right answer. Again, the central idea question, they are basically dependent on the fact that these questions are not looking for a perfect answer, perfect central idea. They are looking for the one which is best from the rest, right? So, your job is to identify one which is best out of the rest. So, option A, constructed as a marketplace of views, social media ensures instant access to information. It is constructed as a marketplace for views, absolutely. But did we discuss social media ensuring instant access to information? No. So, this part is wrong, that is why option A is eliminated. We have not discussed access to information, instant access to information. We have talked more about more popular are those people or that content which might or might not be really good for the people, right? Social media are not ideal or moral institution, but the products built by a company to make profit. Yes, true. This is very much in line. Why? Because you spend money. This is the money. Those who are spending money, the more space they are given to speak, and the more they are visible to people, right? So louder their voice is in the social sphere or the social media. So yes, it is not ideal or moral institution, yes, because they don't care about maintaining the political discourse. They'll show what sells. That is what the second point is trying to make. And that is why the companies, they are the products made by companies to make profit. So this point actually covers both the point. So let's option B, let's park option B. Social media, option C. Social media have been created to strengthen democracy. Absolutely not. No focus on that. They have not been created. There is a whole issue with social media that the author has discussed in the paragraph, in the passage. So how could, and the whole issue is that it weakens the political discourse, democracy. So how could this be the right answer? Absolutely goes against the passage. In today's world, social media are inevitable for well-informed social life. Inevitability part has not really been discussed. Did we discuss that we cannot get away from social media? You have to be on any type of social media to be involved with political discourse or anything. Did we discuss that? Not at all. Eliminated. Only one option makes sense here, option B. So option B is your right answer. Let's move to next question. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. There are certain assumptions that have been made based on the passage. Let's have a look. Internet is not inclusive enough. Is that an assumption? Absolutely yes. Why is it not inclusive enough? The reason has been given by the author in the passage. Those who pay more are heard more. If you have more money, you pay more, you will be able to buy the space to make yourself heard more by the people. So yes, and that is why it's not inclusive enough. It does not cater to each and every single section of the society. It just cares about who is ready to pay, and they are ready to give the space to those people. So yes, internet can adversely affect the quality of politics in the country. Absolutely, it affects the political discourse is the second point. So yes, both of the assumptions are true. Which of the following assumptions are valid? Both 1 and 2. So option C is your right answer. So by the time children reach class 8, the bulk of them tend to be in the age range of 13 years to 15 years. But in our country, about a quarter of all children in class 8 struggle with reading simple text, and more than half are still unable to do basic arithmetic operations like division. So, big number, the first point that I'll make is high number or a big number of students still struggle in class 8. Now, what do they struggle with? The basic things. The basic things that you should know by the time you are in class 1 or class 2 or something like that, or 5th class, right? So, despite that, these people are 15 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, still they are not able to remember any of those things. So, this is what the passage is. These are the people that the passage is talking about. Now, every year, about 25 million young boys and girls from elementary school move into the life that lies for them beyond compulsory schooling. They cannot enter the workforce, at least in the organized sector, till they are 18. For many families, these children are the first from their families ever to get this far in school. Parents and children expect that such graduates from school will go on to high school and college. Hardly anyone wants to go back to agriculture. On the other hand, abilities in terms of academic competencies are far lower than they should be, even based on curricular expectation of class 8. So, this is showing the expectation. This paragraph is basically expectation versus reality. What is actually happening? One quarter can't even read simple sentences, half of them can't even do basic mathematical operations like division. What is happening? Most of these people, do we have number? 25 million young people, they graduate from elementary school, that is 1st to 5th standard, and then they move towards compulsory schooling, which is, no, they'll move into the life that lies for them beyond compulsory schooling, right? So, till class 5 it's compulsory schooling. Now they have an option in life where they don't really have to go to school. Yes. So, there every year 25 million people are graduating class 5 and they are moving towards away from compulsory schooling. So, what happens? They cannot work because they are under 18 years of age. So, what do? These are the people, for many of the families, who have studied the most in their life till date. Okay. On the other hand, this is the expectation from them that they'll go on and study further, right? These are the people who have graduated class 5. The expectation from them is that they'll go on and study further, they'll graduate, they'll work away from, they'll move away from agricultural sector. But what is actually happening? Reality is most of these students, 50% of them can't even do basic mathematical division, right? Mathematical operation like division, and that is the reality. So, expectation is that they'll graduate, they'll work, they'll move away from agriculture. Reality is they can't even do division or multiplication. So, that is the issue. This is what the passage is talking about, right? Again, not going to write down all the points. Let's directly jump to the question. Which one of the following statement best reflects the central idea conveyed by the passage? Central idea conveyed by the passage, the best summary of the passage, the core idea of the passage. Total eradication of poverty in the country will resolve the issue of underperformance of our school children. Will it eradicate? Did we discuss poverty's relation with underperformance in education? Did we discuss that? Not at all. So, 1 can be eliminated. 2, monetary incentives to parents and teachers is a strategy to improve children's academic performance. Is it monetary incentive? Is it really? Not really, right? Passage does not discuss. See, we are talking about the central idea of the passage. This is something that the passage is at least discussing, or this is the core on which the premise of the passage is set upon, and this monetary incentive is not the part of that, and that is why B can also be eliminated. Public policy should ensure that competencies and achievements of young people are aligned with their expectation. Yes, reality versus expectation. Option C talks about that. Public policy should be created in such a way that people who are able should be able to get the opportunities where they can further continue education, right? Young people are aligned with their expectation. Those who can't do even basic mathematical operation like division, their achievements and their competencies are lower or on the downside, should their policy, the public policy should align with them for their expectation as well. Though these are not the people who should be forced to go to universities and forced to graduate. What would happen in that situation? Many of the times these are the people who end up with a lot of debt, right? So C can be eliminated, we can park option C. D, India is not going to take advantage of the grammar, absolutely wrong. We have not discussed demographic dividend and we have not said that India is going to take advantage or not take advantage, not at all. So C has parked is the only option that makes sense. So C is our right answer. Let's have a look at the next question, folks. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. Now there are certain assumptions that have been made based on the passage. Let's have a look at them. For effective school education, parents have greater role than the governments. Is this the assumption that has been made in the passage? Not really. The passage never says that parents' role is more important than governments, right? Or nor does it say that government's role is more important, right? This or this. The passage never says that, and that is why one can be eliminated. Let's have a look at 2. School curriculum that conforms to today's requirement and is uniform for the entire country may address the issues brought out. Again, very random statement that if we have a common curriculum, then we will be able to solve the issue. Does the passage anywhere imply that? Is that the assumption that can be made? No. The passage clearly talks about the career alignment should be in line with the capabilities, right? With the skills that the students have learned. This is not part of that, and that is why 2 can also be eliminated. So which of the following assumptions are valid? Neither 1 nor 2. Option D will be the right answer. Moving ahead to the next passage. The history of science is the real history of mankind. In this striking epigram, a 19th century writer links science with its background. Like most epigrams, its power lies in emphasizing by contrast an aspect of truth which may easily be overlooked. In this case, it's easy to overlook the relation between science and mankind. The author is basically, let's talk about what has been discussed here. In epigram, this is the epigram. In this epigram, I don't even know what epigram means, but most probably in this striking epigram clearly means that some kind of statement that has been made is an epigram. So this statement is an epigram. The history of science is the real history of mankind. Someone said that history of science is the real history of mankind. And the writer linked science with the background. Background is human history. But like most epigrams, its power lies in emphasizing by contrast an aspect of truth which may easily be overlooked. So what does an epigram do? Epigram emphasizes by comparing with a contrast, right? Science and its relation with mankind is a contrast according to the author. And how? To treat the former as some abstract third party. Oh wait, in this case it's easy to overlook the relation between science and mankind. And to treat the former as some abstract third party which can sometimes be praised for its beneficial influences, but frequently and conveniently blamed for the horrors of war. So what is actually happening? It has been used, the science has been used something as a very abstract thing, right? And conveniently, it is sometimes praised for its benefits, right? That, for example, internet. We feel good that we are able to contact to our friends and family, even we are very far away from them. We are living in a distant place from them. But on the other hand, we are very frequently and very easily, we can blame anything negative on science as well. For example, horrors of war or anything, nuclear bomb or the gas warfare, right? All of these things. Science and mankind cannot be divorced from time to time at men's convenience. So the author is saying science and mankind, they go hand in hand. They cannot be separated based on man's convenience. Science of history is science of mankind is what the author is trying to emphasize upon. Yet we have seen that in spite of countless opportunities of improvement, the opening years of the present period of civilization have been dominated by international conflict. Is this the inevitable result of the progress of science, or does the fault lie somewhere? So even despite the improvement in opportunities, the whole scenario is dominated by conflicts and wars, right? So is this something that is inevitable result of progress of science? As we progress in science, does conflict, instead of subsiding, grows further and further, or does the fault lies somewhere else, or science is not the one to be blamed, the blame should be on somewhere else or someone else, is the question that the author is ending with. So basically, again, the passage very straightforward. The way it is written is a little tricky because it has used certain words like epigram. But the whole point is that science and mankind, they go hand in hand. History of mankind is related to history of science. Humans cannot say that use science for its convenience. Whenever something good is happening, they take credit, and whenever something bad is happening, they put it all on the science. It shouldn't go like that, is what the author is trying to say. But also points out a peculiar scenario that even though there has been leaps and bounds of improvement in opportunities in science as well, it all leads to conflict. So is it the result of growth in science, or is there any other problem with it, is what the author is concluding with. Now if we move to the questions, which of the following are emphatically conveyed by the author of the passage? Conveyed by the author of the passage emphatically, again, which of the following can be inferred from the passage is what the question is asking. An inference based question, which of the following can be inferred? Without science, mankind could not have continued to exist till today. True, false, true, absolutely not. Why? Because the passage never correlates existence of mankind with science, right? So one can be eliminated. We are talking about history of mankind and humans going hand in hand, but it does not say that one is completely dependent on the other for its existence. Passage at least does not say that, so one can be eliminated. Two, it is the science that will ultimately determine the destiny of mankind. Again, it is the science will determine the destiny of mankind. Does the passage say that? Can we infer this from the passage? We have no evidence for this, and we have no evidence for the above one as well, and that is why 2 can also be eliminated. So which of the following can be inferred? None of them, neither 1 nor 2. Moving ahead to this question, based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. There are certain assumptions that have been made based on the passage. Let's have a look at it. The horrors of modern life are the inevitable result of the progress of science. Now this looks absolutely right, but if you see, the author has discussed this, but he leaves with the question that is it the inevitable result of the progress of science, or does the fault lie somewhere else? So author is not conclusively saying that, or making an assumption that the horrors of modern life are inevitable result of science. Author is not sure about it. So how can this assumption be made? This cannot be made, so eliminated. Aspect of truth likely to be overlooked is that science is what man has made it. This is true. Science is what man has made it. Why? Because if you go back to the passage, this part, to treat the former as some abstract party which can sometimes be praised for its beneficial influence, but sometimes conveniently blamed for its faults. So man decides what science relation is with human beings, to the mankind, and that is why statement 2 is an assumption that can be made. Which of the following options given above are valid? Both 1 and 2. Sorry, not both 1 and 2. Option B, only 2 only. So option B is the right answer to this question. Let's have a look at this passage now. Only with long experience and opening of his wares on many a beach where his language is not spoken will the merchant come to know the worth of what he carries, and what is parochial and what is universal in his choice. So, very, very, very lovely statement that a merchant, now imagine you are a merchant, you are a trader, only when you open your wares, right, long experience of opening his ware, only when you reach to a new place, a place where you don't speak the language, You go there, you open your, you showcase your things, right, that your wares that you are trying to sell. Only then, if you have done it for long, will you be able to determine what you have is worthy or not for the other party, right? And what is the worth of the what he carries, and what is parochial and what is universal in his choice. For example, if you carry a mud pot, it might not be that valuable as compared to a golden one or a bronze one, right? So that is what the author is saying. What is parochial? What is limited to the area that the merchant belongs to, right? What is limited and what is universal? What is one thing that everyone loves? So if the trader, if the merchant is of gold, obviously he'll be loved. He'll realize that gold is loved everywhere. On the other hand, if the merchant is selling mud or selling grass, he'll realize that no one is really interested in buying it, right? So that is the only way to find out. Such delicate goods, just as justice, love and honor, courtesy and indeed are all the things we care for, are valid everywhere, but they are variously molded and often differently handled. So there are such delicate goods, some delicate goods such as justice, love, honor, courtesy, and all the things we care for are valid everywhere. Human emotions, they are valid everywhere. Positive emotions, negative emotions, but they are variously molded and often differently handled. But their way of handling, their way of molding is very different. Sometimes nearly unrecognizable if you meet them in a foreign land. Sometimes very unrecognizable as well. For example, in India, a way of showing affection is even in India, even men hold their hands. If you might have seen it, at least it was very much common in the older generations. Men used to hold their hands while walking, and it was not frowned upon. But in Western countries, people who come from Western countries, they might find it very odd. They might find it very weird, right? And you might find a lot of videos and a lot of people talking about the same thing, right? So it is the same stuff, right? Your way of showing affection might look very alien to the other people. And the art of learning fundamental common values is perhaps the greatest gain of travel to those who wish to live at ease among their fellows. So, art of learning the fundamental common values, the art of learning how does these delicate goods are expressed. If you learn them, then it is the greatest gain of a traveler. If you're a traveler and if you learn them, these are the things that you have learned the best, these are the things that you have gained if you want to live with your fellows, right? Very straightforward. It's basically talking about the passage is talking about a traveler. If you're a traveler, if you learn how people react, if you learn how people are exactly, how they respond to things in a different way, that is the only, that is the greatest gain, that is the best thing that you can learn from people. That is it, straightforward. Let's have a look at the passage now, sorry, questions now. When we meet other people while we travel, we learn to differentiate between local values and universal values. Straightforward. Not imagination and understanding, no. Communities and nationalities, no. Friends and foes, no. The passage actually talks about parochial and what is universal. We are talking about something which is local and something which is universal, right? For example, cocoa beans were used by Aztecs as currency. They were very valuable, but for someone from Europe, they were a thing to eat. Might have been valuable, might have been not, but cocoa beans were not used for trade. Instead, they were used for making coffee. So that is the thing, right? Some things are, if you take those cocoa beans and you try to, cocoa beans, not cocoa beans, cocoa beans, and you try to use them as currency in Mughal India at the same time, no one would have accepted it, right? So that was local. At the same time, there are certain things which are universal, certain things such as the concept of human emotions. So that is what the passage has talked about, local values versus universal values. Again, the passage is talking about values. I have talked about certain things, materialistic things, to make the understanding of the passage much more clearer. Now, with reference to the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. There are certain assumptions that have been made. Let's have a look at them. Travel leads to an understanding of humans. Yes, it does say you recognize what is local, what is universal. So yes, travel helps those who wish to learn fundamental common values. Yes, this is what the last line actually is implying towards, right? The greatest gift to travel to those who wish to live at ease among their fellows, right? So yes, this is also implied, this is also a fair assumption made based on the passage. A person with long experience in travel can resolve differences among people. Now, can they resolve differences? Not really. A person cannot resolve differences, person can learn, but resolving differences is not really mentioned in the passage. So, 3 can be eliminated. Which of the following assumptions given above are valid? So, 1 and 2 only, option A is the right answer.
Thank you for watching. Check out the course details here.